Most men make themselves too available, always responding, always accessible, always there when called. They think this builds value, that constant presence demonstrates commitment, that being reliable means being present. They're wrong. Presence without absence doesn't create value, it creates expectation. When you're always available, people stop valuing your availability. It becomes default, expected, taken for granted. You become furniture, background, the thing that's always there, so they stop noticing you're there at all. Robert Greene spent 30 years studying power dynamics. He analyzed the figures who commanded attention without begging for it, who created desire without chasing, who made people obsess over them by doing one thing most men are terrified to do. They disappeared. Law 16 from the 48 Laws. Use absence to increase respect and honor. But that's just the surface. Greene goes deeper in the Art of Seduction. He reveals the mechanism behind why absence works, and more importantly, how to weaponize it, how to use your disappearance as a tool, how to make people chase you by simply walking away. This is not about playing games. This is not about manipulating people for sport. This is about understanding a fundamental truth about human psychology. We value what we can't have. We obsess over what we might lose. We chase what moves away from us. It's not conscious, it's neurological. And once you understand how it works, you can use it. 7 principles. That's what Greene's work reveals when you strip away the stories and get to the mechanism. 7 ways to weaponize your absence so people chase you instead of you chasing them. By the end of this, you'll understand why you've been doing it backwards, and you'll know exactly how to flip it. But I need to tell you something first. This works. That's the problem. Once you start withdrawing strategically, once you make yourself scarce, people will chase. They'll reach out more. They'll value your time differently. They'll treat you with more respect. And that power will feel intoxicating, because for the first time, you're not the one pursuing, you're the one being pursued. But that power comes with responsibility, because absence weaponized carelessly doesn't just create desire, it creates resentment. It damages relationships that matter. It turns connection into transaction. And if you're not careful, you'll find yourself alone, not because you chose strategic absence, but because you destroyed every bridge through reckless withdrawal. Greene writes about this in The Laws of Human Nature, the shadow side of Law 16, the men who disappeared so completely they became forgotten, who withdrew so often that people stopped caring whether they returned. There's a line between strategic absence and permanent irrelevance, and crossing it is easier than you think. So as we go through these 7 principles, remember this: absence is a weapon, and weapons can hurt you if you don't know how to handle them. Use this strategically. Use it consciously. Don't disappear from everyone. Disappear selectively. Because the goal isn't to be alone. The goal is to be valued. Let's begin. You're present when you should be absent. That's the first mistake. Most men show up to everything. Every invitation. Every event. Every gathering. They think this makes them valuable. That constant presence builds relationships. That being the reliable one, the one who always shows up, earns respect. It doesn't. It earns exploitation. Robert Greene studied the Renaissance courts, the political advisors who shaped kingdoms, the strategists who moved empires. They had one thing in common: they controlled access to themselves. They didn't attend every meeting. They didn't respond to every summons. They made their presence rare, and rarity created value. This is the scarcity principle. Economics 101. When supply exceeds demand, price drops. When demand exceeds supply, price rises. Your presence is supply. If you're always available, supply is infinite, and infinite supply has 0 value. But when you're scarce, when people have to work to access you, your value skyrockets. Marcus Aurelius understood this instinctively. He was emperor of Rome, the most powerful man in the known world. Everyone wanted access to him, and he could have granted it, could have held endless audiences, could have made himself available to every senator, every advisor, every petitioner. He didn't. His meditations reveal why. Constant exposure dilutes authority. When you're always accessible, people stop seeing your presence as privilege. They see it as right, as something owed to them. So Aurelius withdrew, spent time alone, made his presence an event rather than a given. And when he did appear, when he did grant audience, people listened, because they knew the opportunity was rare, that his time was precious, that accessing him was earned, not expected. Most men do the opposite. They flood people with their presence. They respond immediately to every text. They say yes to every invitation. They make themselves endlessly available because they're terrified of what happens if they're not. They're terrified of being forgotten, of being replaced, of losing relationships because they weren't there enough. But here's the paradox Greene reveals. The more present you are, the more forgettable you become. The more available you make yourself, the less people value that availability. Because humans don't value what costs them nothing. We treasure what requires effort, what demands sacrifice, what can't be accessed freely. Think about the last time you wanted something desperately, really wanted it. Chances are it was just out of reach, not impossible, but not easy. That tension, that gap between desire and access, is what created the want. Now think about something you have unlimited access to. Water, air, the internet. Do you value them? Consciously, maybe. But emotionally, no, because they're always there. And what's always there becomes invisible. Your presence works the same way. When you're always there, people stop seeing you. You become background, expected. The person who always shows up, so they don't have to think about whether you'll be there. You just will be. And that certainty kills desire. Strategic absence breaks this pattern. When you start saying no, when you decline invitations without explanation, when you create gaps in your availability, something shifts. People notice. Not consciously at first, but they feel it. The space where you used to be, the absence that shouldn't exist, and that absence creates curiosity. Why didn't he show up? Where is he? What's more important than being here? Those questions are power, because now you're not furniture. You're a mystery. You're not expected. You're wondered about, and wonder is the beginning of desire. Here's the mechanism in practice. Start tracking how often you show up versus how often you decline. Most men show up 80% of the time or more. Flip it. Show up 40% of the time. Not randomly, strategically. Show up when your presence actually matters, when you can bring value, when the gathering serves your purpose. Decline everything else. And when you decline, don't explain, don't justify, don't apologize, just decline. You'll notice the shift within weeks. People will start asking about you when you're not there. They'll reach out more when you are available. They'll treat your time as something valuable because you've demonstrated through action that it is valuable, not through words, through scarcity. But here's the trap most men fall into when they learn this. They withdraw from everything. They disappear completely. They think more absence equals more power. It doesn't. Total absence isn't strategic. It's isolation. And isolated men aren't chased. They're forgotten. The key is selective presence. You show up where it matters. You disappear where it doesn't. You make people work to access you, but you're worth accessing when they do. Because absence without substance is just unavailability, and unavailability without value is irrelevance. You respond too quickly. That's the second way you're destroying your value. Someone texts, You respond within minutes. Someone emails, you reply immediately. Someone calls, you answer on the second ring. You think this makes you reliable, professional, a good communicator. It makes you cheap. Immediate response signals one thing. You were waiting. You had nothing more important to do than respond to them. Your time was available, uncommitted, ready to be claimed the moment they reached out. And if your time is that available, it's not valuable. Because valuable time is allocated, committed, difficult to access. Robert Greene writes about this in The Art of Seduction. The most seductive people are the ones who make you wait. Not cruelly, not indefinitely, but just long enough that you wonder what they're doing, who they're with, what's occupying their attention that's more important than you. That wondering creates tension, and tension creates desire. Sun Tzu understood this from a military perspective. In The Art of War, he writes that the greatest generals control timing. They don't respond to enemy movements immediately. They wait, they observe. They let the enemy commit, and then they act. Because immediate response is reactive. Delayed response is strategic. One signals desperation, the other signals control. Think about the people you respect most. The ones whose time feels valuable. The ones you're careful about bothering. Do they respond immediately? No. They respond when they're ready, when they've processed, when they have something worth saying. And that delay makes their response more valuable. Because you know they chose to respond. They didn't reflex. They decided. Now, think about the people who respond instantly, to everything, at all hours. The ones who clearly have notifications on and jump the moment their phone buzzes. Do you respect their time? No, because they've demonstrated through behavior that their time isn't valuable, that they're always available, always waiting, always ready to drop everything for anyone who contacts them. You're probably one of those people. Most men are. Because they've been trained to believe that quick response is professional, that delayed response is rude, that people deserve immediate access when they reach out. They don't, unless it's an emergency. Nobody deserves immediate access to your attention. Your attention is your most valuable resource, and you're giving it away instantly to anyone who asks. Here's what Greene teaches through historical example. The powerful never respond immediately, even when they have time, even when they've read the message. They wait, they create gaps, they make people wonder, not to be cruel, but to maintain value, because the moment you respond immediately, you've signaled that their demand was more important than whatever you were doing, and that signal reduces your status. Niccolo Machiavelli writes about this in The Prince. The ruler who makes himself too accessible loses respect. People begin making demands instead of requests, expectations instead of hopes, because access has become assumed rather than earned. The ruler who controls access, who makes people wait, who grants audience when he chooses rather than when it's requested, maintains power, because the wait itself is a reminder that his time is his to allocate, that accessing him is privilege, not right. Most men are terrified of making people wait. They think delayed response damages relationships, that people will get angry, that opportunities will be lost. Sometimes that's true, but far more often, the opposite happens. The delay creates value, makes your eventual response more meaningful, demonstrates that you're busy with important things, that your life doesn't revolve around immediate availability to everyone who contacts you. Here's the mechanism. Create response gaps, not uniform delays, variable delays. Sometimes you respond in an hour, sometimes 6 hours, sometimes the next day. The variability is key, because predictable delay is just a different form of availability. People learn your pattern and adjust, but unpredictable delay keeps them uncertain, keeps them wondering, keeps the tension alive. And when you do respond, Make it count. Don't respond just to acknowledge receipt. Respond when you have something substantive to say, when you've processed, when you've decided. Quality response with delay beats instant, empty acknowledgement, because the first demonstrates thoughtfulness. The second demonstrates desperation for connection. If you're getting value from this, subscribe now. Most men will watch this, understand the mechanism, then go back to being instantly available tomorrow. Subscribing is a commitment device. It's you telling yourself this matters enough to remember. Do it now. But here's the warning. Delayed response as tactic only works if you have substance behind it. If you're delaying response but your eventual response is empty, meaningless, low effort, the delay doesn't create value. It creates frustration. People have to believe the wait was worth it. That your delayed response contains more thought, more value, more substance than an instant one would have. Otherwise, you're just being unavailable without justification. You explain where you've been. That's the third mistake. You disappear for a day, a week, and when you return, someone asks where you were, and you explain in detail. You tell them what you were doing, why you weren't available, who you were with, what kept you occupied. You think this is courtesy, transparency, respect for the relationship. It's none of those things. It's surrender. When you explain your absence, you're justifying it. You're submitting your disappearance for approval. You're asking them to validate whether your reason for being unavailable was acceptable. And the moment you do that, you've handed them power, because now they get to judge whether your absence was justified, whether you should have made time, whether your priorities were correct. And that judgment diminishes your autonomy. Robert Greene is explicit about this in Law 16. The powerful never explain. They don't justify. They don't defend their choices, because explanation is defense, and defense implies guilt. The moment you feel the need to explain where you've been, you've accepted the premise that you owe them an accounting of your time. You don't. Unless they're paying you or raising you, your time is yours to allocate, and you don't need permission or approval for how you spend it. Friedrich Nietzsche writes about this in Beyond Good and Evil, the master morality versus slave morality. The slave seeks approval for his actions. He needs others to validate his choices. The master doesn't. He acts according to his own values and lets others interpret as they will. Explaining your absence is slave behavior. It says their opinion of how you spend your time matters more than your own judgment. Think about the people you see as powerful, the ones who command respect. When they're unavailable and someone asks where they were, what do they say? They smile. They deflect. They give vague answers. I was busy, had things to handle, needed to take care of something. No details, no justification, no defense, just acknowledgement that they were elsewhere and now they're here. Now think about weak people, the ones desperate for approval. When they're unavailable and someone asks where they were, they launch into explanation, who they were with, what they were doing, why it was important, why they couldn't respond. They're seeking forgiveness for the absence, seeking validation that their reason was acceptable, and that seeking diminishes them. Most men do this reflexively. Someone asks where you've been, you explain. It feels like courtesy, like respect, like transparency builds trust. But what it actually builds is expectation. The expectation that you owe them an accounting, that your time is subject to their approval, that disappearing without approved reason is transgression. Here's what no other channel will tell you about this mechanism. The explanation doesn't just lower your status. It teaches them how to control you, because next time you want to disappear, you'll remember that you had to explain. You'll remember the interrogation, and you'll start pre-justifying your absence. You'll start seeking implicit permission before you withdraw. I might be busy this weekend. I have a lot going on. You're asking for approval to be unavailable, And once you're asking for approval, you've lost. Marcus Aurelius faced this constantly as emperor. Everyone wanted to know where he was, what he was doing, who had access to him. If he'd explained every absence, every withdrawal, every moment of privacy, he'd have been consumed by justification. Instead, he simply didn't explain. He was available when he chose to be, unavailable when he chose not to be. And no explanation was offered or expected, because emperors don't justify their time. You're not an emperor, but you're sovereign over your own time, and sovereignty means you don't answer to anyone about how you spend it. When someone asks where you've been, you have three responses. 1. I was handling something, vague, deflective, gives nothing. 2. Why do you ask? Flips the frame, makes them justify why they need to know. 3. Smile and change the subject. Acknowledge the question without answering it. All three demonstrate the same thing. Your time is yours. You don't explain it, but here's the critical piece. This only works if you actually were doing something valuable with your absence. If you disappeared to play video games for 3 days and someone asks where you were, your inability to explain will feel like shame rather than power. Because shame and power have different energy. People can feel the difference. Power says I was doing something important that's none of your business. Shame says I was doing something embarrassing that I can't defend. So before you stop explaining your absences, make sure your absences are worth not explaining. Make sure you're using your time in ways that serve you, that build you, that advance your purpose. Because unexplained absence only creates mystique if there's something mysterious worth concealing. Otherwise, it's just secretive insecurity. You return too eagerly. That's the fourth way you're undermining your own value. You disappear for a few days, create some space. People notice your absence, reach out, ask where you are. And the moment they do, you come running back. You respond immediately. You re-engage fully. You make yourself available again, as if the absence never happened. And in doing so, you've destroyed all the value the absence created. Robert Greene writes about this extensively in The Art of Seduction. The seducer creates absence to build desire, but the amateur seducer makes a critical mistake. They return the moment they sense interest. The moment the target reaches out, they think the reach out means the job is done, that the desire has been created. So they come back. But coming back immediately destroys the very desire they work to build, because the return proves the absence was conditional, that it ends the moment attention is paid. That availability can be purchased with a single text. The professional seducer does the opposite. When the target reaches out, they take their time responding. When they do respond, they're warm but not available, present but not pursuing. They extend the absence even after contact is made, because they understand something the amateur doesn't. Desire is built through sustained tension, through want that can't be immediately satisfied. The moment you make yourself fully available again, the tension releases, and with it goes the desire. Sun Tzu understood this from a strategic perspective. In The Art of War, he writes about the principle of advance and retreat. The general who advances too quickly, who commits all forces immediately, loses tactical flexibility. He's all in. The enemy knows his position, knows his strength, can plan accordingly. But the general who advances slowly, who holds reserves, who maintains mystery about his full capability, keeps the enemy uncertain. Uncertain enemies make mistakes, and mistakes are opportunities. Your return after absence works the same way. If you rush back the moment someone reaches out, you've shown your full hand. You've demonstrated that their attention controls your availability, that reaching out to you brings you back, that your absence was just a tactic waiting for their interest. And once they know that, they control the dynamic. They reach out when they want you, ignore you when they don't, because they've learned you'll always come back when called. Think about a dog and its owner. The dog runs away. The owner calls. The dog comes running back immediately. What has the dog taught the owner? That calling always works. That the dog's absence is temporary and easily ended. That the dog is always available if you just call. Now imagine a cat. The cat leaves. The owner calls. The cat looks, considers, maybe returns, maybe doesn't. What has the cat taught the owner? That its presence is its choice. That calling doesn't guarantee return. That accessing the cat requires more than just demand. You're the dog. Most men are. Someone reaches out during your absence, you come running. You think this demonstrates you care, that you're responsive, that you value the relationship. All it demonstrates is that you're controllable, that your absence was never truly your choice, that it was waiting for their permission to end. Here's the mechanism Greene teaches through historical example. When you return after absence, return slowly. Respond to the reach out, but don't rush back to full availability. Acknowledge their message. Be warm, be brief, but don't immediately re-engage as if the absence never happened. Let there be continued space, continued gaps. Make your full return gradual, because gradual return extends the tension, extends the desire, makes them work for your presence even after they've made first contact. Marcus Aurelius did this naturally. As emperor, people constantly sought his attention. When he granted it, he didn't grant everything at once. He might respond to a letter, but not grant immediate audience, might agree to meet, but not until several days later. The acknowledgement was permission to hope, but hope isn't satisfaction. And unsatisfied hope creates continuous desire for access. Most men don't have the patience for this. Someone reaches out during their absence. They interpret it as victory. The absence worked. They noticed. They care. So they rush back. Full availability restored. But in doing so, they've taught the other person something critical. That absence is just a ploy. That reaching out ends it. That your availability can be earned with minimal effort. The truth is, your return should be earned. Not with a single message, but with sustained interest, with demonstrated value, with reciprocal effort. If someone reaches out once during your absence and you come running, you've set a price. One message equals full access. That's cheap. But if someone has to reach out multiple times, has to demonstrate actual interest, has to put in effort before you fully return, you've set a different price. You've made your presence valuable. But here's the warning. Extended return only works if you're actually doing something valuable during the continued absence. If you're just sitting there ignoring messages to make them wait, that's not strategic absence. That's game playing. And people feel the difference. Strategic absence means you're genuinely occupied, genuinely focused on your purpose, genuinely unavailable because you're building something. The gradual return happens naturally because you're not sitting around waiting for their contact. You're busy. And busy people don't drop everything to respond. Drop a comment right now. Which of these principles are you violating most? Where are you destroying your own value? The men who comment are the ones who actually implement. Silence in the comments means you're still passive. Prove you're not. You disappear without building first. That's the fifth mistake. The one that turns strategic absence into permanent irrelevance. You learn about weaponizing absence, about creating scarcity, about making people chase you through withdrawal. So you disappear. You make yourself scarce. You stop responding. You decline invitations. And nothing happens. People don't chase. They don't wonder. They just forget you exist. Because you disappeared before giving them a reason to remember you. Robert Greene is explicit about this in The Art of Seduction. Absence only creates desire if there's something to desire. If you've built value first. If you've created an experience, a connection, a memory of what your presence offers. Without that foundation, absence isn't mysterious. It's just empty space where someone used to be. And empty space gets filled quickly. Think about it economically. If a store you've never shopped at closes, do you miss it? No, because you didn't know what it offered. You had no experience of its value. But if a store you loved closes, you feel the loss, because you know what you're losing. The absence creates longing because the presence had value. Your absence works the same way. If you disappear before people experience your value, before they understand what you bring, before they have memories of why your presence mattered, your absence doesn't create desire, it creates relief. Oh, he's gone? Okay. One less person to keep track of. This is why most men fail when they try to weaponize absence. They learn the tactic, they implement immediately, and they disappear from people who barely knew they existed in the first place. No foundation, no value established, no reason for anyone to notice or care that they're gone, so nobody does. Niccolo Machiavelli understood this principle deeply. In The Prince, he writes that a ruler must establish power before withdrawing from public view. The new ruler who tries to appear rarely is seen as weak, hiding. But the established ruler who appears rarely is seen as powerful, busy with important matters. The difference isn't the behavior, it's the foundation. One has proven his value, the other hasn't. Here's the sequence Greene reveals through countless historical examples. First, you establish presence. You show up consistently. You bring value. You make people associate your presence with benefit. You create positive experiences. You demonstrate competence. You build relationships. This phase isn't about scarcity, it's about abundance. You make yourself available. You contribute. You become someone people genuinely value having around. Then, and only then, you begin the withdrawal. You start declining invitations, creating gaps, making yourself less available. And because you've built foundation, because people have experienced your value, your absence creates a void. The benefit they're used to receiving from your presence is now missing. The positive experiences aren't happening as often. The competence and contribution they relied on is suddenly scarce. That's when desire forms, when they realize what they've lost. Most men skip the first phase. They're so eager to be chased that they start running before anyone knows they're worth chasing. They want to be mysterious before they've been memorable. They want to be scarce before they've been valuable. And mystery without memory is just forgettable. Scarcity without value is just absence. Here's the mechanism in practice. Before you weaponize absence, build for 6 months. Minimum. Show up consistently. Bring value everywhere you go. Make people laugh. Solve problems. Be competent. Be generous with your time and expertise. Create experiences people remember. Build genuine relationships. Become someone people actively want to be around. Then start the withdrawal. Slowly. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Just gradually become less available. Start declining things. Creating space. Making your presence less guaranteed. And because you built foundation, because people know your value, your absence will be noticed, felt, wanted to be remedied. But if you disappear without building first, without establishing value, all you've done is remove something nobody wanted anyway. And remove things that weren't wanted don't get chased, they get forgotten. Marcus Aurelius never had to worry about this. He was emperor. His value was established by position. But most historical figures who successfully weaponized absence did it after years of establishing presence. Leonardo da Vinci was available and productive for years before he could afford to be selective about commissions. Machiavelli built his reputation before his absence from politics became notable. Greene himself wrote for decades before his scarcity could create demand. The pattern is consistent. Value first, scarcity second. If you reverse it, you don't become desirable. You become irrelevant. You withdraw from everyone equally. That's the 6th way you sabotage your own power. You learn about strategic absence, about selective availability, about making people chase you through scarcity. So you become scarce to everyone: parents, friends, colleagues, romantic interests. You make yourself equally unavailable across the board, and in doing so, you destroy the entire mechanism. Strategic absence only works when it's selective. When you're present for some people and absent for others. When you're available for some contexts and unavailable for others. Because selective availability creates comparison. It shows that your time can be accessed, that you're not just unavailable, period, but that accessing you requires something. And the people who don't have that something see others accessing you and wonder why they can't. Robert Greene writes about this in The Laws of Human Nature. The powerful maintain inner circles. They're available to some people freely, but those people are carefully selected. Everyone outside the circle sees the availability and wants in. The scarcity isn't universal, it's gate-kept, and gatekeeping creates value through exclusivity. Think about exclusive clubs, nightclubs with velvet ropes, private lounges, members-only spaces. What makes them desirable? The exclusivity, the fact that some people get in and others don't. If nobody got in, the club wouldn't be desirable, it would just be closed. But if everyone got in, it wouldn't be exclusive. The value comes from selective access. Some people are in, you're not. And that difference creates desire to be in. Your availability works the same way. If you're unavailable to everyone, you're not strategically scarce, you're just isolated. Nobody is chasing you because nobody sees anyone else accessing you. There's no comparison, no exclusivity, just absence. But if you're available to some people and not others, if some people clearly have access while others don't, the ones without access want it, because they can see it exists, they just don't have it. Machiavelli understood this instinctively. In The Prince, he writes that the ruler must maintain favored advisors, people who have access, who are seen to have access. Because their access demonstrates that access exists, that the ruler is available, just not to everyone, and those outside the favored circle work to get in. They compete for access. They demonstrate value hoping to be selected. The ruler's selective availability creates competition for his time. Most men don't do this. When they implement strategic absence, they disappear from everyone. They stop responding to anyone. They decline everything. They become universally unavailable. And universal unavailability doesn't create desire. It creates dismissal. People don't think you're busy with important things. They think you're antisocial, depressed, difficult. Because there's no evidence you're available to anyone, you're just gone. Here's what you do instead. You select inner circle, 3 to 5 people who have genuine earned access to you, who you're available for, who you show up for, who you respond to quickly. These people demonstrate that you're capable of availability, that you're not just unavailable by nature, that your time can be accessed. They're proof of concept. Everyone else gets strategic scarcity, delayed responses, declined invitations, limited availability. And because they can see you're available to others, because they know your time is being allocated somewhere, your scarcity to them isn't absence, it's exclusion. And exclusion creates desire to be included. But here's the critical piece. Your inner circle has to be earned, not given freely, not based on who knew you first or who asks nicest, based on value, on reciprocity, on who brings something to your life that justifies their access. Because if your inner circle is random, if it's arbitrary who gets in and who doesn't, the exclusivity doesn't create desire. It creates confusion. People don't understand what earns access, so they don't know what to do to get it. The access criteria should be clear through your behavior. You're available to people who bring value, who reciprocate, who respect your time, who contribute to your life rather than drain it. That clarity teaches people what's required. and they either step up or accept being outside the circle. Marcus Aurelius maintained layers of access, the inner circle of trusted advisors who saw him regularly, the second tier who had occasional access, the third tier who could request audience but weren't guaranteed it. Everyone else got formal, limited access only. This structure demonstrated that access existed, was valuable, and was earnable, and people worked to move up the tiers because they could see others had what they wanted. You need the same structure, not formal, not announced, just practiced. Some people have easy access, some have moderate access, some have limited access, some have none. And the differentiation should be based on value they bring, not history or need. Because selective availability based on value attracts more value. People see that accessing you requires contributing, so they contribute. Here's the shadow side. This mechanism can turn you into someone who only values people for what they give you, who evaluates every relationship transactionally, who withholds presence from people who genuinely care about you just because they don't bring obvious utility. That's not strategic absence. That's sociopathy. The goal isn't to commodify relationships. It's to protect your time from people who don't value it while giving it freely to those who do. There's a seventh principle, the one Robert Greene circles around but never states explicitly, the one that separates men who use absence successfully from men who destroy themselves through it. And I need to warn you about it before I tell you what it is. This seventh principle is dangerous, not because it doesn't work, because it works too well. Once you implement it, you can't go back. People will sense the shift. They won't be able to name it, but they'll know you've changed, and they'll either be drawn to you or repelled by you. There's no middle ground anymore. The seventh principle eliminates neutral relationships. You become someone people either want desperately or want nothing to do with. Most men aren't ready for that. They want to be liked by everyone, want to maintain comfortable relationships with as many people as possible, want to avoid conflict and rejection. The seventh principle destroys all of that, because it forces you to accept something uncomfortable. Not everyone deserves your presence, and making yourself scarce to people who don't deserve you will make them hate you, and you have to be okay with that. If you're not ready to be hated by people you've outgrown, don't implement the seventh principle. Stay at principle 6. It's safer, more comfortable. You can still weaponize absence without crossing this line, but you'll never reach the level of power that comes from fully embracing strategic withdrawal, because full embrace requires letting people go, permanently, and most men can't do it. You've just learned 6 principles of strategic absence: how to create scarcity, how to delay response, how to refuse explanation, how to return slowly, how to build before withdrawing, how to be selective about availability. Together, these create the foundation. They make your absence work. They turn withdrawal into weapon. But they're incomplete without the seventh, the principle that makes everything else sustainable, that prevents strategic absence from becoming lonely isolation, that ensures you're building something with your time instead of just hiding from people. The seventh principle is purpose. You have to disappear toward something, not just away from people. Absence without direction is just avoidance, but absence in service of purpose is power. When you withdraw to build something, to master something, to achieve something that matters more than social availability, your absence stops being withdrawal and becomes focus, and people feel the difference. Robert Greene wrote every one of his books in periods of intense isolation. He disappeared from social life, declined invitations, stopped responding to most people for months at a time. But his absence wasn't just about creating scarcity. It was about focusing completely on the work. The books required everything he had, and giving everything to the work meant nothing left for casual social maintenance. People respected that absence, even those excluded by it, because they could see what he was building. They understood his withdrawal served something bigger than himself. The absence wasn't rejection. It was dedication. And dedication toward purpose is magnetic. People want to be around people building important things, even if being around them means not being around them most of the time. This is what Nietzsche means when he writes about the will to power in Beyond Good and Evil. Not power over others, power to create, power to build, power to manifest your potential. The man pursuing power withdraws from the world not to punish it but to focus on creation. And that focused withdrawal is completely different in energy from the withdrawn man hiding from life. Marcus Aurelius wrote meditations during campaign, during periods of intense military focus. His absence from Rome wasn't about making senators miss him. It was about leading armies, protecting borders, doing the work of emperor. The absence served Rome, and Rome accepted it because the purpose justified the withdrawal. Here's the mechanism. Before you weaponize absence, identify your purpose. What are you building? What matters enough to justify withdrawing time and attention from people? What's worth disappointing people to protect? If you can't answer that, you're not ready for strategic absence. Because without purpose, absence is just hiding. And hiding doesn't create desire, it creates concern. But when you have purpose, when your absence clearly serves something important, people understand. They might not like it, they might miss you, but they respect it. And respect is the foundation of desire. We desire what we respect. We chase what we value. We want access to people doing important things because their importance elevates us through proximity. So your seventh principle is this: disappear toward purpose. Use absence to create focus. Use scarcity to protect time for what matters. Use withdrawal to build something worthy of the isolation it requires. And let the building justify the distance. When someone asks where you've been, you don't have to explain. But if you did explain, if you revealed what you've been building, they'd understand. That's the difference between strategic absence and antisocial avoidance. Strategic absence has substance behind it. The withdrawal serves creation. Avoidance just serves fear. The shadow warning for this principle is the most serious, because purpose can become obsession. Focus can become isolation. And the man who disappears so completely toward his purpose that he forgets why he's building, who he's building for, what the point was in the first place, he doesn't become powerful. He becomes lonely. Successful, maybe. Accomplished, perhaps. But alone. Robert Greene writes about this in The Laws of Human Nature. The driven men who achieved everything and had no one to share it with. Who built empires and realized too late that empires without relationships are just empty buildings. Purpose justifies absence, but purpose without connection becomes prison. The balance is what makes the seventh principle work. You withdraw toward purpose. You build. You focus. You achieve. But you maintain the inner circle, the people who earned access, who support the building, who remind you why it matters. You're not available to everyone, but you're not unavailable to everyone either. You're selectively present to the people who deserve it while generally absent to protect the work. That selective presence is what makes you human instead of machine, what keeps the purpose from consuming you, what ensures you're building something worth having instead of just hiding from people behind productivity. If this changed how you see yourself, hit the like button. Not for me, for the algorithm. So this reaches the men who need it, the ones still playing the game designed to keep them invisible. Now go weaponize your absence.